Chicago Bears training camp is underway, the vibes are great, and we're going to talk about it. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Alexis Jade, and this is the Shecago Bears Podcast. So we are about 2 weeks into training camp, I'd say, and so far the vibes coming out of camp are pretty immaculate. Everyone is in high spirits, and it seems like whether it's the coaches talking or the players talking in media or pressers, I should say, or it's the Chicago Bears media posting videos of camp so far, it just seems like the vibes are there. And it seems like the energy is really up, the juice is really there, it's flowing. And I don't know, it can't help but be infectious. It's got me excited, and I think it's got a lot of Bears Twitter excited. It's definitely getting some of the attention of media around the NFL, not on a global scale, but I would just say it's definitely, the chemistry, some of the moments from training camp have started to get headlines. And I can honestly say that this is very reminiscent of the 2018 season. I don't want to say that that's what's going to happen. I don't want to give those expectations, but I do really think that it has the same kind of vibes. And Eddie Jackson even said that they're, at least on the defensive side of the ball, it's giving a lot of 2018 energy, which can't be a bad thing, right? Even if the season doesn't play out like 2018, I mean, just knowing that the team is that positive and that energetic going into the season, it can't help but bring good fortune throughout the season, I would say, at least to the best of their roster availabilities right now. So far, the first few days of camp, the offense came out hot. It seemed like the offense was really ahead of the defense. They were coming out strong. Chemistry was flowing between Justin Fields and his wide receivers, specifically DJ Moore, Chase Claypool. And honestly, it's really exciting to see. I can't remember the last time the Bears offense was the one ahead of the curve. And especially this early in camp, usually it's the opposite for teams. It's not uncommon for the defense to be ahead of the offense. And the offense has been cooking. They've been doing pretty well. And it's nice and refreshing to see the Chicago Bears offense being the one that's kind of ahead of the curve. And especially knowing this is going into year 3 for Justin Fields, year 2 in Luke Getsy's system, it's really nice knowing that this is kind of how they're starting training camp off. So it's really, really positive so far for the offense. And that doesn't come without some defensive win as well. The defense just recently came back and had a really strong practice against the offense. According to reports, the defense won the day. But overall, the offense has been performing well. And even when the defense performed well, which you want to see the defense have wins too, because that means you have a balanced team. And even when the defense won the day, Justin Fields, leader of the Bears, leader of the offense, came to his presser in good spirits, came excited, even though they lost, quote unquote, the day, just saying how it just makes them better. And you can just tell he's got that positive energy around him, even when the offense isn't necessarily performing well. Since then, there's been some more back and forth between the offense and defense, and the offense came back from that practice strong off the bat, came back and had another good day. And I think it just goes to show that we have a good team kind of brewing. I mean, obviously it's way too early to tell, but you like seeing the back and forth between the teams and knowing that good things are happening, and there's some chipping, there's some combativeness a little bit between the players, and you want to see that. You want to see a little chip on everyone's shoulder because they just want to win that bad. And that so far is kind of what training camp has been, and it's been really refreshing, especially compared to the past few years of Bears training camp. When it comes to new addition DJ Moore, the connection between him and Justin Fields really just carried over right from OTAs into training camp. I mean, I don't really, at least from what I've seen, and that's really secondhand reports, I don't think there's been any reacclimating they've had to do. It's been pretty seamless, and that deep ball connection is scary good, and it's going to be really scary for opposing teams. And I'm just happy to see that they're getting along so well on and off the field. But knowing the connection is this strong now and it's just the beginning of training camp, I can't wait to see what that develops into the beginning of the season, into later in the season. I mean, it can only get better, and that's a really good thought for Bears fans and a really scary thought for anyone opposing us. On the flip side of that, from the defense, between Kyler Gordon, Jaquan Brisker, Eddie Jackson, Jalen Johnson, our secondary is looking really good. And I know it's still super early to say and take everything with a grain of salt, but they're having a good training camp, especially that secondary. The defensive front we'll get into later, but that's still something I'm still iffy on. But so far, our secondary is looking pretty strong, and I'm excited to see how it gets better throughout camp and see kind of what it looks like transitioning into the season. But we also know last year the secondary was one of our strong suits on defense, even though they didn't really get a fair shake because our pressure up front was little to none. But yeah, so far it's looking great, I would say. So with all that being said, we're gonna go into things I'm concerned about so far within 2 weeks of training camp, and things I'm excited about / looking forward to. Obviously, I'll say it again, it's still early, but this is just what I'm thinking at the time being. I'm not doing any overreactions and I'm not doing any underreactions. I'm just giving so far my thoughts. So that being said, we'll start with the negative first, things I'm worried about. Number one, offensive line health. Now, it's early in camp, and I know I sound like a broken record saying that, but just please keep that at the front of your brains. But we have had some injuries on the offensive line. We have Tevin Jenkins, Nate Davis. They both were out for a few days. Nate Davis actually is still out. Just today, Tevin Jenkins, today being August 5th, Saturday, Tevin Jenkins was back in with pads, which is, thank God, a really good sight to see because we all know Tevin has his injury-prone issues, especially with his back. And anytime he's out, you kind of start to wonder, is his back acting up again? But thankfully, he's back out, so that kind of eases some of my concerns. I actually wrote down my ideas here before I filmed this, and luckily Tevin was back in before I started filming this today. So that's good news. But Nate Davis is still not in yet, but he is present on the field and he's walking the sidelines. So it does kind of make me think that it could be a muscle thing, could be a hamstring that they're just watching closely and being extra cautious because it is still so early in camp that you don't want to risk further injury when it's really not necessary. Which that I'm 100% behind, and I do think that is the general case for most of these quote unquote undisclosed injuries we have right now. I think a lot of it is just very precautionary because why risk injury when week one is still basically a month away? Not worth it. Lucas Patrick and actually Alex Leatherwood sub in a few times, and so far they've looked all right. It's really hard to tell with limited reps and limited on pad action, but it's gelled, but they've definitely allowed some pressure on Justin Fields, so it does make me slightly concerned, which is why I have it as a concern, because the main thing that comes from that is it shows our lack of depth at offensive line. Now, obviously, like I just mentioned, Alex Leatherwood, Lucas Patrick, makes me feel a little bit better that we have them, but Cody Whitehair at center, he's getting a little older. He hasn't played center in a while, and I do kind of question his longevity and also his performance at center is still something to see. But yes, the injuries in camp kind of really put a glaring light on if some people go down this season, which they inevitably will, we might have some roster issues on the offensive line, and Lord knows that it does not matter if Justin Fields has DJ Moore to throw to if he doesn't have time to get him the ball. So, all that being said, I'm not trying to overreact because it's still early, and I do still have faith in this offensive line, and I think it's going to be 10 times better than last year, but I am worried about depth at the offensive line, and I think that's reasonable. The other injuries, I'm just listing as a concern because there have been quite a few so early on. Once again, it's probably all mostly precautionary, knock on wood. But nonetheless, Jack Sanborn, he's been out. He came back from an ankle injury, which we still don't really know the full details of. And he had 2 free practices and he's been out the entire time. And luckily, we have seen him walking the sidelines and he has been physically at practice, just not participating. Um, but it is a reason for concern. And I also think, that being said, Tremaine Edmonds is a recent addition to the linebackers not participating. This has been, I think, day 2 of Tremaine Edmonds not participating at practice, and him and Sanborn being gone, leaving just TJ Edwards and the backups for that position, once again shows a little bit of a depth issue. However, you would like to hope that in a season you don't have 2 of your 3 linebackers out, but you never know. But Tremaine Edmonds and Jack Sanborn and TJ Edwards, when they're all in, I think it's a very strong unit. But when they start falling off, it's when you can start getting a little worrisome. However, that's nothing. That's just any position on any roster, so it's not worth freaking out over. But it's just something, more injuries are starting to pile up, and it kind of makes you go. But I think everyone is hopefully okay. Tremaine Edmonds has been also spotted at practice on the sidelines and seems like he's doing all right. And the defensive coordinator also commented that he is not worried about Tremaine Edmonds. Now, coaches kind of have to say that, especially when they're not allowed to give injury designations. So we'll see. But the good news is they've all been present on the field. So take it as it is. Oh, one other person I almost forgot to mention on the defensive front is DeMarcus Walker has been absent for quite a few days now, and we don't know what the situation with that is either. However, he once again has also been at practice, walking the sidelines, talking to players, just not participating. No visible ailments to any of these players that we can at least see from them walking around. So looks like it's all mainly precautionary or taking care of something minor to make it sure it doesn't escalate. My last concern kind of goes into the defensive line and the offensive line. I'm mainly worried that because we've seen some back and forth at practice and there has been some pressure on Justin Fields, is that because our offensive line is struggling with, new rookie Darnell Wright, and just the unit as a whole, is that because the defensive line is starting to be very good when we had DeMarcus Walker in. We obviously have some new additions to the defensive line that I'll get into in a bit. But it's so hard to not overthink it, but at the same time, practice is meant to go back and forth. It's going to happen. It's just the defensive line and the offensive line are the 2 arguably most important position groups of football, and they're both kind of question marks for the Bears, and that is the general concern for me. And it's so hard, and I don't think we'll have an answer throughout all of training camp until we see it in games and we see them against other teams, and then we go, oh, yeah, that's a problem, or oh, we're good at that. That's not a concern. But we won't know, and we won't know until week 1 versus the Packers. Go Bears. We better win that game. Now, getting the negativity out of the way, let's get into some positives, starting with new signings. The Bears signed Yannick Ngakoue the other night for a 1-year, $10.5 million deal. Sounds like kind of a bargain for both the player and for the Bears. Much needed help on the defensive line, especially rushing the passer. We need hits on the quarterback. We need to get pressure on the quarterback, especially to help our secondary and help our entire defense and get Justin Fields the ball. But that is a welcome addition, something much needed, something a lot of people have theorized we might, or a player we might go for, and it's kind of been predicted for many months now, and I think the Bears kind of went back and forth on doing it, and eventually training camp happened. Ryan Poles saw we need help and called him up and said, get on the Bears, buddy. Now he's here, and he has a bear tattoo on his wrist, and he's ready to go. And the Bears also signed a kind of surprise signing, in my opinion, tight end Mercedes Lewis, formerly a Green Bay Packer, but he is an excellent blocking tight end. He has a reputation that upholds him, and I think this is a great signing for the Bears. It allows Cole Kmet and Robert Tonyan to kind of be out on the field and not limit their reps due to having to help block on the offensive line. And I think it's a very smart move by Ryan Poles, especially knowing that our offensive line might need help, and especially mainly because of the scheme that we run, having a really good blocking tight end for the running game play action is going to be vital. And I think that was a really, really smart signing. And besides the talent and the actual football aspect of it, he's a seasoned vet and a leadership veteran, older presence on the offense that we really need with such a young team. Speaking of tight ends, our hometown buddy Cole Kmet got a 4-year extension to be a Shecago Bear. This is the first signing of Ryan Poles' career as the GM of Shecago Bears, if you don't count him giving a 1-year extension to Equanimous St. Brown. But this is the first official multi-year extension Ryan Poles has given, and I think it's super smart on the Bears' part and super well-deserved on Cole Kmet's part. Cole Kmet has been a vital player of this rebuild, and he's a hometown guy. He loves the Bears. He wants to stay here, and he's proven to be one of the top tight ends in this league. Obviously, some other teams might disagree with that statement, but I think if you look at stats and you look at performance, he's a very, very good tight end, and I'm happy that we get to keep him around for another 4 years. And I think that just was a morale booster also for this Bears team, knowing that Ryan Poles is willing to give out extensions to guys he didn't necessarily bring onto this team. And he values hard work and performance. And I think that's a really good sign, and I think it's really good for the locker room, and I'm really happy for Cole Kmet. Another honorable mention here is the rookies kind of shining through in training camp. We have Darnell Wright. There hasn't been too much, honestly, happening yet of him to be able to say, wow, he's killing it in training camp. But from the clips we've seen, he's had some highs, he's had some lows, which is to be expected of a rookie right tackle. However, there are some moments where he really looks like a stone wall, especially in pass protection. I've seen some secondhand video from training camp, and it really looks like he is has some moments where there is nothing getting by him. And I just think he'll improve, health permitting, as the season goes on and become a really solid right tackle. Wide receiver Tyler Scott, rookie we got this year in the draft, has really started to come to his own. He's really started to shine in training camp, mainly impressing with his speed. He is fast, and that much is really evident on the field. And he has really, really started to show that he can be a really good deep threat with an addition to DJ Moore for Justin Fields. He is quick, he is shifty, he is intelligent, very mature. I think he knows how to play the game really well. To quote him, he said that part of being a good receiver is to be a good actor, and I think he just really hones in on his craft, and I really like that about him. And I think as he matures in this league and gets more playing experience, he's going to be really good. And he's had some dropped issues in camp so far, but obviously I'm going to just right now chalk that up to being new in the system, and that happens a lot. Granted, we don't want a Velus Jones situation, but I'm really impressed by Tyler Scott so far, and I think a lot of the Bears media and players and personnel are as well. And I am really excited to see how he's incorporated into this offense. Some other honorable mentions that I can't forget before ending the podcast here is Chase Claypool has really been killing it in camp. For all the concerns that have been around about him from last season and not performing well in a new system and getting put on the PUP list right before training camp started, then taking off the PUP list, he has been having a solid training camp. I mean, the dude is more than solid. He is showing out, and he is making some contested catches. Justin Fields is going to him a lot, and I really think he's impressing in training camp, and he honestly right now might be the star of the show in training camp if you exclude Justin Fields, because it's Justin Fields. But he's really starting to come to his own, and I think it's obvious he has a much better grasp on the system. And obviously, if no injuries come about, which knock on wood, let's hope no more come, I'm anticipating a pretty good season from him. And at least that's my hope, because we need him to perform well. And if he performs like he has been in training camp, Bears wide receiver core is looking pretty good. And speaking of wide receiver core, Darnell Mooney, there was obviously concerns about him coming back from injury. And so far, he looks like the same Darnell Mooney. He does not look like he's missed a beat. He is a little buffer on the upper body, which can only be beneficial. And he's looking the same shifty, fast, speedy Darnell Mooney that he was last season. And he's also had a really good training camp, and he kind of was eased into it the first few days, and since then he's just taken off. He's just being Darnell Mooney. There's nothing else to add to that because it's as expected. Honestly, I don't anticipate there being any issues transitioning to regular season because he looks like Darnell Mooney, and Darnell Mooney is a beast. Speaking of the defensive line, DeMarcus Walker has been a really good addition to this Bears team. He's been a vocal leader, a good presence up front. He's gotten a lot of pressure on Justin Fields, pressure on the offensive line, and he's really just kind of showing out. Unfortunately, he's recently been out with injury, like I mentioned earlier, so a bit of a concern, but prior to that, he was really having a good camp, as well as Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker. I mean, I know we saw a taste of them last year, and we anticipated them to have another good year this year, but whew, they're they're having some highlight reel clips out there, and if they continue to perform the way they are now in training camp and continue to perform that way in season and even better, that secondary is looking scary good. And I honestly think Jaquan Brisker is looking at some like Pro Bowl level play. Maybe that's a hot take to say, but I mean, dude is showing out. I mean, he's a stud. There's no other way to say it. He's a stud, and I'm really, really excited to see what his season looks like this year. I obviously probably missed a few little things here and there, but overall, this was my brief little recap of Shecago Bears training camp so far. Family Fest is on Sunday, so anyone going, as long as weather permits, I hope you have a great time. Obviously, I could continue talking about training camp in the Shecago Bears for another 30 more minutes, but got to keep it short. So I appreciate everyone for tuning in. If you want to see more consistent content, check out my TikTok, and on my YouTube channel, I'll continue to have weekly podcast episodes. We're going to be going over training camp. We'll go over some pros and cons of the coming up to the season, and I'm really excited to get this thing going. Hit the like button, subscribe, follow on all the socials, and leave a comment down below. What are you most looking forward to this 2023-2024 NFL season? Give me your hot takes. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, this has been the Shecago Bears.